Hey everybody, welcome to J Stern Designs and welcome to the Prom Gown Sew Along. Today what we're going to do is take a look at the yummy fabric Abby picked out at Fabric Place basement yesterday. We drove to Natick, Massachusetts, and we picked out a silk charmeuse, which is beautiful. You can see it's right here, and it's really pretty, and it's very, very close to the color of the original dress. So we were super excited to find this. I asked the sales lady what would be a good thing to line this with. I was worried about having static cling, when it was made up into the dress. And she said that they had this lining called Hang Free, and it's an anti-static lining. And she said that I could use it under the silk. So normally when I make silk dresses, I usually use a silk lining. But for this charmeuse, I think I'm going to try this Hang Free lining. So that's going to be an interesting experiment as we go along. So these are the fabrics that we found yesterday, and we are going to be working with them this week. And let me explain what our plan is going to be. I wanted you to take a look at the strapless foundation that I've been working on, and you can see up here, so let me see if I want to get it so you can see, it sort of comes up to the side seam, and then it does this little jump where it kind of humps up a little bit. And when it was on Abby, she wanted it to be sort of straight coming off the side. So it was the way I drafted it. So let me show you the pieces. I traced a neat copy of the pattern pieces and I put them on the my light table, and I'm going to show you how to tidy up this upper edge of the strapless foundation. So let's take a look at that. All right, so I put my pattern pieces on the light table, and you can see right here where the side and center front pieces match. It's not a smooth curve line up. It sort of comes to the seam and then bumps up. And that's what I created when I straightened out the princess or the sweetheart neckline in the beginning, but I don't want that to do that. So now that I have it all together, I'm going to start from here, and I'm going to build the neckline up just a little bit higher, and I'm going to make a smoother transition to here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start down here like this, and I'm just going to sort of draw in a line, and then I'm going to keep that line going, and I'm going to go right through onto my center front piece like that. All right, so you can see now what I've done is I've sort of made a nice smooth transition from side to center front, and then I'm just going to finish it up like so. All right, so I added a tiny bit of height at the top, and you can see that it's now not going to make that weird divot over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my paper so that the side is on top. I'm lining that back up, and I'm lining it up over here, and so these all line up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this too. So I'm going to extend this like this. I'm going to extend this. Oops, I don't need that one. And then I'm just going to redraw. I'm just going to finish redrawing my line like this. All right, so see, now you can see what I've got is the tops match up and make a smooth transition from side to center front. All right, so while I have the pattern on the light table, I just want to check my side seam. So here's my side seam. You can see I've lined up, the dash line is my seam line. And you can see down here, it's slightly off. I'm just going to make a smooth transition here by just getting rid of that little bit. Okay. Okay, see how that looks? Okay, I flipped the pattern pieces so the back piece is on top of the side front now. And I'm just going to repeat that by smoothing it out to match this way too. Okay, so that way I know that these are going to match up. So you can see when I put them right sides together, they match down here, and you have that little flip up here. Okay, but they match at the seam allowances here and here. All right, so you can see here, these are my adjusted pieces. And in addition to changing these edges up here, filling them in to make it a smooth transition, I also added an extra 1/2 inch around the edges. So now I now have a 1-inch seam allowance. When you're working with fitted garments and interfacing, and we're going to add boning, it really helps to support the garment to use big seam allowances. So I'm going to be sewing this together at 1-inch seam allowance. And that way, if I need to fine tune fit anything, if I need to let it out, you know, or obviously if I need to take it in, I can do that. But I like to have the big seam allowances for any last minute fitting. Plus, it really helps support the seam. So you can see here I've added 1-inch seam allowance. Okay, and I labeled everything. So you can see here my stitch line, my seam allowance, my stitch line, right there, the dash line. And the same thing on the side front piece. I've got my 1-inch seam allowance, my stitch line, and so on and so forth. The next thing I wanted to do is plan where I'm going to put my boning, because I'm going to use spiral steel boning. And when I order it and when it comes in, we're going to talk about that some more. And I'm going to tell you why I chose to use that versus plastic boning. And for now, I just needed to make sure I ordered the right length pieces, because they come in, you know, every 1/2 inch length. So I've planned this out, and this is where I'm going to put my boning. I'm going to put one right along the center front. I'm going to put one along the seam, you know, between the side and front pieces. Then I'm going to put one on a diagonal from sort of the almost, you know, right at the base of the princess seam, sort of angling out towards the side seam. And then I'm going to put one along the side seam. In the back, I'm going to do 2. I'm going to do one in the center of each side, and then I'm going to do one along the back closure. And that will just help hold everything up. In addition to using this spiral coil boning, I'm also going to get horsehair, and I'm going to support all the seams with it as well, because I really want this dress to stay up and I want it to be comfortable. So when we go to work with that, I'm going to give you all the particulars on that. In the blog post that goes along with this video, I'm going to give you a link to where I'm ordering my spiral boning. They also have casings ready to go. So instead of making casings for this dress, I'm just going to order that. So all I have to do is sew it onto the lining and not fuss with it. You can also make your own casings for the boning. And basically you can use the fabric that you're working with. You can either use lining fabric fused with interfacing, or, you know, another fabric. You can use twill tape. You can use you know, anything that's a firm woven fabric. And what you want to do is you just want to sew channels in where you're going to put the boning. And I'm going to show you how to do that in an upcoming episode, but I just wanted to give you the heads up that I'm going to order the casing because time is of the essence for me. But you can feel free to make your own, and I will give you some tips on that when I show you the one that I ordered. The next thing I want to do is I want to show you my new design page. And I took advantage of the croquis and the pieces, and I used my light table and I traced the version of the dress I'm doing. And it gave me time to really stop and think and make sure that I had all the elements I wanted. For example, this pattern has a separate waistband between the bodice and the skirt. I've eliminated that. So we're not going to have that because the lace is going to come down and cover that seam anyway. So, you know, I made sure I drew it in with no waist seam. I have all my seams here and my slightly full skirt. You can see I'm really a talented sketch artist here, but I've got the sketch of the dress. And then what I did is I did the full front and one back piece of the foundation, and I just drew in the plan for my boning. And then I drew another bodice layout here, and I'm going to use that later when I start designing how I'm going to work with the lace. So the upcoming topics are going to be how to do boning and how to work with lace that's on netting, because that's what I'm going to be using, the gold lace that we found. So this is my new design page, and what I like to do is I like to take swatches of my fabric and pin that to it so I have it all together, and I keep these books, on my bookshelf, so I ever need to look back and see what I did, I've got a record of what I did. All right, so the next thing I wanted to do is pick out my interfacing. And I wanted something relatively firm because I'm going to be interfacing all the pieces for the bodice. And, again, I need to have a stable shape so I can work with the lace and for the boning, and I just want it to be very firm and I want it to stay up. So I ended up going with Palmer and Pletch's tailor weight interfacing. Okay, and you can see that it's, it's a fairly hefty interfacing. I fused a sample onto the silk charmeuse and onto the lining. So I'm actually going to line both of these fabrics because I want it to be armor. So I can get a nice firm hand without it being super stiff though, because you can see in the lining, it almost makes it like a Duchess satin weight. It's very stable, and it's going to be, it'll support the boning. And then the same thing with the silk charmeuse. I fused a piece on, and it almost gives it a satin feel instead of a silk charmeuse, and it's not going to shift around and be difficult when I sew it together either. So that's going to really help us when we're sewing the bodice pieces together, is to have them interfaced. So I've got my interfacing on my fabrics. I've got all my fabric. So if you are following along and you need to get your fabric, have that ready for Thursday, because I'm going to show you how to lay out and cut tricky fabrics that slide around. I'm also going to show you how to fuse the pieces, fuse the interfacing to the bodice pieces. And then I'm also going to show you how to sew a French seam, because when you're working with slippery fabrics or fabrics that are see-through, if anyone's working with silk organza or georgette or chiffon, a lot of times you don't want the seam allowances to show and you don't want to use a serged edge. You can do a French seam. So that's what I'm going to show you on Thursday. So if any of you are following along and you've made sketches and you're making a plan to go along with your dress and you'd like to share that, I'd love to see it. If you have any questions or comments, you can post them below, or you can visit my blog at J Stern Designs. And if you need to get your fabric, you have a few days to get it before we start cutting, so you have time. But in any case, that's it for today. All right, so I'll see you on Thursday when we actually cut the fabric out, interface the pieces, and I'll show you how to construct the seams. So have a great day, and I'll see you on Thursday.